All right, everyone. Welcome to.
You muted yourself,
Eric,
Eric.
you're
You
muted.
unmuted yourself.
Weird. Okay. Uh, I was searching for the mute button. I couldn't find it. And somehow I muted myself and everyone. All right, here we go. Mute all. Sayonara. And am I muted? Okay, no, I'm not. Okay, cool. All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's December 2nd, 2020. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and then showing them the ropes. If that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered, so feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours, and you'll get an invitation in your mailbox to join these meetings regularly. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to the Office Hours channel, as well as follow up with an email that you can share with your team. We're also syndicating it to YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/c/cloudposse, you'll find us on YouTube as well. So with that said, let's kick this off. We got tons of announcements to try and get through here. And first, some logistics. So, usually office hours is entirely all about just announcements and answering questions. Every now and then we have some special guest speakers, and we have two lined up for the rest of this year. One is for Cloudsmith, which is a universal package registry or package host, which we use at Cloud Posse to distribute all of our packages. Lee Skillen, the CTO of that, will be joining us next Wednesday for office hours to talk about some of the challenges of package management. And, I think it's really fascinating, actually, because we all depend on packages, and they've solved it. So after that, we got a really, really special edition of Office Hours coming up that we've been working on. We've arranged with HashiCorp, Scalar, Spacelift, and N0 to talk about the product highlights that they offer in about 10 minutes each. Not going to be full demos and stuff like that. We can't get that all there. But what I really want to do is put these companies on everyone's radar. So you stop trying to do Terraform continuous delivery in Jenkins and use a managed platform for that. So it's going to be really interesting. There'll be a Q&A after that. That's going to be on December 16th. Regular office hours. We'll probably go over. We'll probably do it for about an hour and a half with Q&A and stuff like that. So mark your calendars. All right. Any questions about those two announcements? All right. So let's get into some of the early reInvent announcements. They've been clearly holding back on us a lot of goodness that has been going on for the last few years. These are things that I know have been requested for a long time, so I'm very excited about these particular ones. Obviously, there's a flood more, but one is Lambda's being now priced per millisecond. That's obviously to be competitive with some of the other cloud providers. I guess when you operate at the scale where that matters, congratulations, and you're now billed per millisecond. Anything somebody would like to add to that?
I'll just say that I watched a presentation yesterday of a company who was doing, I think he said 13 billion events a day that they were processing. So he was very excited by that
Yeah.
by that announcement.
And that's what I mean. Like, congratulations.
Yeah. Oh, it was Nielsen, the rating service.
Nielsen
They,
ratings, yeah.
Yeah, so they use Lambdas to process a lot of that. So they were happy about that.
Yeah, that is cool. One thing that I'm even more excited about is the potential of now using Docker images and bring your own images, bring your own binaries, bring all that stuff and run it in a Lambda-esque environment. It's, the difference between this and something like ECS Fargate is with ECS Fargate, it's still online 24/7 versus with Lambda, it's still, and now it's on demand like the rest of your functions. Beyond that, haven't had a chance to dig deeper into how that works. Has anybody else looked into the Docker support for Lambdas or any of the examples they provided?
I'd be real interested to see what the cold start, times are for those things if you're booting your own Docker image. So there's probably a lot of constraints around what will work.
Yeah. Well, but there are things in Lambdas to mitigate the cold start, right? Keeping some number of containers warm. Yeah. Vlad, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, you're also paying for the init time if you're using Docker. If you're using the normal Lambdas, you're not paying for init time. If you're using Docker, you're paying for init time. So that might be a difference for some people.
Yeah. That said, it's hard to argue that would be more expensive. Well, okay, different points, right? It's not going to be more expensive than doing Fargate tasks, presumably. But yeah, cold start, that could be rough. Probably you don't want that for your search autocomplete when on your website.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So the other exciting thing I thought was the ability to run macOS now on AWS. So you can do your package signing and application builds there for that. I'm sure people are raising their fists that it doesn't support M1. What the heck? But that will probably come shortly thereafter. And I think under the hood it's just. What was that, Vlad?
They confirmed M1 is on the way in 2021, I think.
Okay.
AWS commented publicly on M1.
Okay.
It's coming.
That's good. It makes sense. So, and under the hood, it's doing what all those other managed providers were doing. I guess they have racks of Mac Minis with 32 gigs of RAM, and cool, but sad that it still comes down to that, running racked Mac Minis. All right.
It's not their choice, it's Apple's.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, licensing.
Just wait for the iCloud. It's coming.
Yeah. Wait, what? iCloud? The real iCloud. Infrastructure as a service.
This is Todd. I took a look at that earlier today, and it requires a dedicated host, which shouldn't be surprising. And it's in every region except for Northern California, which seems like a snub.
That's funny. That's a little bit ironic. Made with love, not in California.
Right.
And you have to prepay 24 hours.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah. So when you spin one up, you pay for 24 hours, and then once the 24 hours are up, it goes to per second or whatever, and it's about $1 an hour. So it comes out to just under $26 a day for a Mac Metal VM.
Is this? I haven't actually looked how Metal is priced on AWS. Is that also consistent with the other Metal pricing that you pay first for a day and then it goes to per second?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
Okay.
For Metal, it's typically a fair bit more, but yeah.
I think he was talking about do you have to pay 24 hours in advance for?
Is there a minimum commitment with other bare metal?
For not Metal, no, I don't believe that.
Okay. Yeah, so this is unique. I wonder if this is a sign of what's to come with AWS as they introduce more instance classes as a way to kind of subsidize those investments. They maybe do this temporarily.
Typically, also not the case. Just speaking from very deep experience with that.
Yeah.
Although you can get them to build your own specific instance type, but you have to literally buy it for 3 years. It's kind of interesting.
That makes sense. Yeah, under some enterprise agreement.
Yeah, it would be an enterprise feature. So if you have a TAM, that's the person that has it.
Gotcha. Good to know. So the next announcement I didn't have a chance to go deep on as well, which was the announcement of an EKS specific distro. of Linux that is designed such that you can run it on-prem as much as you could run it in AWS, so you have a consistent operating system and platform for that. And at least the marketing buzz around this is that it is hardened based on the years of experience running EKS at scale at Amazon, and now commoditizing that so you can use it on-prem if you want to do that. I'd be curious. I haven't looked into this. Some things I wish that it would ship with just to make it easier would be things like AWS Inspector and the SSM agent, but I suspect it doesn't come with those still. Anybody know more about that?
Yeah, so it's not just the Linux distribution, but it's also all the upstream tools they use. So it's all the Kubernetes compiled the way they do and configured the way they do it, and all of their command line tools, et cetera. So the idea is basically you can run an EKS cluster like in your data center. And I think they're really targeting people who are looking to shift from on-prem to cloud. So they'll build it locally in their own data center, migrate over, and then eventually migrate that over to the cloud.
Oh, thank you for calling out that distinction.
Well, and I wonder too if that could be useful for developers who are testing locally. Could they run that on in a VM on their desktop to simulate a little EKS cluster?
Bring up a vagrant EKS cluster.
Yeah.
I have a feeling this isn't going to be that easy to deploy.
Yeah.
It's
Public service announcement: Cloud Posse is now going to require you to run a vagrant to run all your EKS tests. Joking. Yeah.
Now that my Mac Mini is hosted in AWS, I could repurpose it for this EKS distribution.
Yeah. Seriously. So, all right. The next one, Vlad, you brought this to our attention this morning, was spot instance. Amazon spot instances are now first class capability of managed node groups. Anything you'd like to add to that, Vlad?
Woo! I haven't actually tested it, so don't blame me. But there were a bunch of EKS announcements happening not in the keynote, so on Twitter through the public containers roadmap. So if you're not subscribed to that, do subscribe to it. Some notable ones are the EKS console has been updated. You can now see like deployments, pods. It's a lot more full featured. What else? They started, what were they called? Manage add-ons. So you can now update the AWS VPC CNI from the console. And they're working on getting other stuff in there, like, core DNS and all the other things. They basically want setting up an EKS cluster to be, okay, you create an EKS cluster and you set up versions for whatever you want installed. No, not what it goes like right now, where you get an EKS cluster and you do a bunch of YAML applies to update the latest CNI or whatever.
Yeah,
but that's a work in progress.
Those CNI upgrades between major versions of Kubernetes, I'm hoping that will be addressed then by some of the stuff you're talking about.
Well, I've seen screenshots again. Not
hoping to do it.
Time to test anything, but
that was been a pain
it's basically a point and click in the console from what I've seen.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely subscribe to issues in the public containers roadmap if you're interested in that, because they post links when they're close to like, hey, this got announced. Here's a blog post. Here are the updated docs and things like that.
Yeah. That is a good tip. I'm going to post some of these links here, which I haven't been doing, see if those come out right. Yeah, so these are the links from my notes here that I've been sharing, if you guys want to click through and follow through.
Could you fix a typo? It's Vlad Ionescu, I, not L.
My bad.
Don't worry about it. It was just staring at me. I'm like,
of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I apologize that. All right, corrected. All right, then the next one is one of these things I want to get excited about it, but how many like deployment platforms does Amazon have to come out with, and I can't get them straight anymore? I get it. Cloud Posse, we've had to rethink deployments many times, and AWS has the unfortunate situation. They got to then continue to support those other 5 mechanisms for the next 15 years. But at least that's better than what Google does and just shuts it down. So for this announcement, AWS Proton is an automated management solution for container and serverless deployments. This was brought to my attention by Matt, who's on our team. And the gist of it sounds really exciting. Matt, do you want to explain it in your own words?
Yeah. So I think from my perspective, it looks like they're providing a tool that allows, and it's geared towards enterprise customers, really. So they provide a tool that allows the platform team to build out and define a platform using infrastructure as code. It's a little vague which IAC that is, but I'm assuming it's CloudFormation. So you build that, and then you can also then set up templates for services that will run on top of that platform. And then developers will be able to use the console to self-service, to enable and take their code and run it on the platforms that the platform team builds. And then you'll have a sort of service catalog where you can see a dashboard of all the services that are running across all your platforms and be able to promote things between environments and a bunch of other things. So it sounds very promising, but it's definitely in its early stages. It says it's in preview now in a couple of regions, and I just opted in, but I hadn't gotten approved yet. So I haven't actually got to play with it. I've only read the marketing materials.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So it's like a framework for building platform and like a service catalog that can be used with a team and factors in continuous integration and delivery as part of that.
Yeah, and I think it's really trying to simplify for the non-DevOps developer to be able to self-launch their services, but give control to the platform team, who can put in guardrails and compliance and logging and monitoring and observability, all the things that they need into these templates. And then basically the developer just brings their code and it runs on top of all that to comply with whatever their enterprise-wide standards are. So it's pretty exciting, but we'll see where it goes.
I think of this tool as kind of like a container-based Amplify, where they're providing you a CI and CD pipeline. They're using CloudFormation under the hood to like scaffold out a bunch of services for you, and it's just kind of automated. But then the problem with that is that if you want to go past what's automated, you are going to hit roadblocks. If you're a CloudFormation shop, maybe that's okay with you, and then you can kind of pull in CloudFormation and make it your own. But yeah,
a little bit like AWS Control Tower and landing zones. It's like it makes that one thing really easy, but if you want to go outside of what it does,
I want to jump in here a bit. It's not CloudFormation only. So first of all, this is very much in preview. So send your feedback to AWS. They also got a public roadmap on GitHub, which is very, very nice. So you can comment in there, but it's not CloudFormation only. So for the actual templates that they're using, they are using providers. And right now they have a CloudFormation provider, but they are planning work on a Terraform provider.
Wow.
So this would basically be a way to, from what I understand it, and it might be very wrong because I'm so confused about this, but it would basically, in Terraform words, be a place where you push your templates, which are your modules and your module versions, from like an ops team. And then every single team that has applications in there, they can update those versions. They get validated. They get pushed through CICD, through your monitoring pipelines and thingies. But again, fair chance I'm wrong. They're also working on GitOps and Kubernetes integration and a bunch of things. Again, they have an open roadmap on GitHub.
Sounds like 2021 is shaping up to be the year of automation platforms with Spacelift, Scalar, M0, now Proton coming out. It's like the birth of a category.
Yeah, If you happen to have a link to that roadmap, Vlad, that'd be great if you could post it. If not, I'll Google it up.
I started it on GitHub, so I'm gonna find it in a couple minutes and send it in the Zoom chat.
Is that where you saw something about them using providers under the hood where they could possibly swap out CloudFormation for Terraform?
There is an open issue for Terraform, and I also saw providers in, what was it, console screenshots.
Okay.
I am sending the link to the roadmap in the chat. Sorry, I did, and they have 24 issues open, and one of them is to integrate with HashiCorp Terraform, issue number 1, of course. Which is in working on it. So AWS is actually working on this.
Wow.
It's past the researching stage.
Wow.
So that's such a good
Not containers
sign.
roadmap. That's the containers roadmap.
Oh, okay. Oops.
It's awesome. You definitely should look at this, but it's in the same org. Search for AWS-Proton.
Okay.
That's really interesting to hear because, with the recent Terraform day 0 support for, what was it, network firewall, and AWS actually saying they're working on something that supports Terraform that's like native to them. I basically feel allergic to CloudFormation because it locks you into only dealing with AWS resources, right? Like you can't deal with, if I have Cloudflare as my DNS provider, I can't do anything else. Nope. Or I have to go outside of that tool. It'd be really cool if they got on board. I would love to hear that. I have to read.
Can you count and iterate and do all that stuff? Sorry, go ahead.
CloudFormation also has like external resources or something. I know they got announced last year, and I was very excited about that. So
I couldn't get off mute.
I don't know if there's any community.
There's actually a thing called CloudFormation resource providers that do allow you to interact with a bunch of other things, just like Terraform does. But I don't know how big that community is. I only have experience in it in its very early days.
And those run as Lambdas or something?
It runs like in the native like CloudFormation stack where they run that. So.
I didn't know that at all. That's interesting. See, I'm so allergic to CloudFormation that I completely disregarded it.
Well, CDK came out and stole everything, and the CloudFormation landscape is a bit weird in my opinion.
Yeah. Very cool. So then I'd like to make one more announcement. It's not reInvent related. Then we'll get to some questions and we'll fill in the rest of the time with other cool reInvent conversations, since that's clearly what is on everyone's mind. Pepe, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. So for everyone who doesn't know, Pepe is one of the major open source contributors in the Cloud Posse's community. If you've submitted a pull request, he's probably reviewed it at some time. He's been amazing. And a side thing for Pepe has been really taking over Atlantis, which is one of the other automation platforms for Terraform that's open source. That project has stagnated or stalled in some ways and frustrated people who depend on Atlantis for their production workloads. Well, there's some really good news. I'll let Pepe introduce some of that, what's going on there, since you have firsthand experience of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so what happened is that our company is building a solution for scanning infrastructures as code. And we have this week of I don't know if you ever heard about those FedEx time where you can do improvements for one day every 2 weeks or so. Well, in the company we have this 1 week project, and I brought it up as an idea to maybe try to integrate the new tool we are building with something that already takes Atlantis as a consumer and runs Atlantis, Terraform plans, and then try to scan them, etc. And so I start asking about doing forking, because since it was staggered, the project and the PR that I sent was sitting there for so long. It looks like I made enough noise for Luke to actually look into adding more maintainers, and he ended up adding about, I think, 7 people. If you look at the maintainers list, is growing. He's adding more people, which is amazing, because he wants to actually, he didn't, it looked like he wasn't actually looking into improving more the project, but the real reason behind it is he's way too busy, so he needs help. So it's cool to see that we are not going to have to fork it, and we can actually build our integration within Atlantis. And so we have some conversations, and he had me and like I said, and a bunch of other people. I think it's seven or 8 people that are new maintainers for Atlantis, which means that now I can actually press the merge button, which is good, so that that Cloud Posse code that has been there for many years finally is going to make it to Atlantis, which is pretty exciting, because there is a bunch of other people that have mentioned new features that are pretty useful, and I have been talking to other committers of PRs that have been complaining about the same thing. So it's pretty exciting to see that we might see a pretty shiny future for Atlantis with many new features.
So what, like, just to call out a couple of those that we've really been wanting for is this one here, like the GitHub team allow list. So you can restrict which teams can ever even run a plan on Terraform code. And believe it or not, that wasn't a core capability of Atlantis before. And there was some opinions on why that was the case, but it's softened now, and it looks like, I'm guessing with Pepe's help here, this will get merged. Another exciting one is supporting plan and apply endpoints in Atlantis, so that you can integrate Atlantis with your other CI systems through webhooks, the way everything works these days. So I'm hoping that also get merged. Any questions on this announcement regarding Atlantis?
I'll just say that that's good news. I actually thought the project was kind of sitting stagnant, because it might have been a conflict of interest with Luke's new gig at HashiCorp and
right.
at Terraform Cloud. So I'm glad to hear that isn't necessarily the case.
Yep. I think that's what everyone was kind of thinking.
And now is the time to actually, if you think that Atlantis is missing features, to put those features on as issues. So now I can actually tag them as feature requests, which would be cool to have them all there, so that we can start working on them. So please do that.
All right. Yeah. Open call for feature requests in Atlantis. All right. I posted a link to in Office Hours channel for the link to Atlantis. Yeah. What was that?
Question, Eric, how does this change your opinion of Atlantis versus Terraform Cloud? I know you went to, well, Cloud Posse went to Terraform Cloud because you needed more programmatic control over Terraform applies.
I think it makes it a lot more interesting all of a sudden for the company that absolutely insists on using an open source solution for this that they want to manage. I still really like CICD to be a SaaS, because then you can treat it like an axiom. It exists. I don't have to know about like where in the life cycle it exists or when it's created. I don't need to worry about it going down or managing upgrades or how to scale the CI/CD platform, because even that needs to have a staging environment for it. So depending on how large your organization is to manage that side of your infrastructure, like the iceberg underneath, I think is a consideration now if it has it. That said, go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add one thing. I guess my only counterpoint to your argument there, Eric, is that I still feel like with Terraform, maybe it will be fixed in Terraform 14 with the sensitive variables thing, but Terraform is a little loose with its security and what's output on console and what's temporary state where it's written and then uploaded to a backend state provider, et cetera. And I've never been a great fan of having that sort of out of my control and a third party that then has the whole, keys to my kingdom of being able to do anything on an AWS side. So if that gets tightened up a little bit and, maybe some sort of dynamic role provisioning to do just the thing you need to do gets put into place, then I'd become a lot more comfortable with just treating it as a SaaS. There's always trade-offs, so I hear your point.
Yeah. There is a massive trust issue.
Leap of trust or whatever.
Yeah. And you're giving the keys to the kingdom to some third party, and that is hard to palate. It's mitigated by a few things. Many of these platforms support runners, and then those runners can have the roles. But that's not to say that this SaaS platform can't trigger that runner remotely and more or less affect a similar outcome. It's a brave new world.
Does anybody know if Terraform Cloud is PCI compliant or HIPAA compliant?
Not yet, I don't think. Yeah.
So to that last concern, it seemed to me that we've all got the same problem, right? If Vault can pre-exist, then you can reach out to it and you can grab things without having to trust anyone or anything and pass those along. And it is hard to keep it out of your Terraform state, but that stuff becomes temporary. Like, for example, right? You've got Vault. You can spin up a database. Cool. That's in Terraform. If you generate your username and password for the database automatically in Terraform using the random stuff. All right, great. But you plug that into Vault and let Vault take over the management of that. True, you do have it in your log. It's in there, but the Vault automatically rotates the password, and who really cares at that point?
Yeah, so there's some strategies through the apparatus on how that can get rotated and mitigate some of those security concerns. I am excited about those sensitive variables, though, in 0.14, so that they won't be persisted in the state, and they will just automatically be masked.
And I have a question for that, too. Do you guys know if does Sentinel help you to mask that stuff in the state, or does it just prevent you from being able to do certain operations?
It's more the latter. It's a policy agent, so it's not going to operate, I think, on securing that state, but limit what you could do with it.
Yeah. So you can't avoid providing, your RDS master account password to the RDS provider right now when you spin up a new instance, as an example. If the new provider marks that as sensitive, then when you pass that in, it will no longer be written out to state or the console or any of that kind of thing in 14. That will be really nice.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. So then we had two questions that came up this week, and I just want to point them out here. One is a question by Padarn. Are you on the call today by any chance, Padarn? And if not, that's okay. We'll just do a shorter answer because I think it still benefits others to be aware of some of those patterns. First one here was, hi all, what are some of the approaches for application configuration management in Kubernetes? A few topics I'm interested in is one like dynamic configuration, like let's say a configuration of a feature flag in an application. And the other is deploying applications that share configuration or secrets. So I'm not sure if, we have, there were a number of replies added here. Vlad, I see you also, brought up some things. Just to point out a few patterns generally I see as it relates to this is one is an operator pattern. So there are a lot of operators out there that help you work with dynamic configurations depending on what you want to do. One of the key things in Kubernetes is that when your config map or secrets change, by design, your pods don't pick it up. That way things remain stable. That way you can still do rolling updates or whatever other strategy you're using for changing or rotating your secrets. Nonetheless, that is a common request that when your config maps change, you want to rotate them. So, so the Reloader project by Staccator Staccator is one of those. We deploy that in every one of our client engagements with the Staccator with the Reloader project. What you can do is basically add an annotation that when this deployment cares when this secret changes, and when that happens, trigger a rolling update just by invoking whatever mechanism that is in the deployment. So it's not implementing its own operator to handle rolling updates. It just triggers whatever pre-configured behavior is the default for that deployment, for example, or the stateful set. The other thing is, like, the other common pattern is for secrets. So how are you going to have dynamic configuration of secrets? Again, the pattern is operators. So you have an operator that looks at SSM, for example, or Amazon Secrets Manager, and replicates that into your Kubernetes namespace. And then guess what? Use the reloader maybe to reload your apps when that thing changes. So these operators can be tied together. And then Vlad brings up, I think, the more elegant solution that is non-Kubernetes specific. And I think it's an important distinction to make here, is that I think a lot of us, and Cloud Posse is part of this, has done this historically a lot, is that we almost use deployments as a feature flag. The act of doing a deployment changes the behavior of the app, maybe by changing some environment variable or things like that. But that's a bad habit in the long run, is coupling deployments to features. And a better way of doing this is using a formal feature flagging framework. And there are open source versions of that, and there are commercial versions of that. So Launch Darkly, that Vlad talks about here, is a commercial version of enabling that stuff. And then Flagger is one of several, I think there's 4 or 5 of them now, feature flagging frameworks that are open source.
I'll just add one other quick thing that I've done some pretty extensive feature flag based development. So two things to remember is every time you introduce a new feature flag, you're introducing technical debt.
Yes.
That needs to be gone back and cleaned up at some point once that becomes part of your general release. And then second, in microservice-based architectures, it gets really hairy that you receive the feature flag sort of on the front end usually, and then you have to then somehow in all of your downstream calls put it in a header, and then all those other microservices have to read it from the header and figure that out. And so you're introducing sort of a distributed, potentially distributed tech debt that you have to clean up like later on to figure out what your behavior is, especially if you start to do like canary deployments where you can ramp up and down percentages of traffic or target specific user-based attributes and all of that kind of thing. It can get really hairy. So don't just, I would say don't jump into it unless you really have to do it. That's kind of my thing there. It's not an easy thing to take on.
That's a good consideration that I think is not often enough expressed, is that it is a form of tech debt that you gotta come back and factor into the main code if you end up running with that feature permanently. In terms of the headers and all that stuff, that's an implementation detail, and that's ultimately what some of these feature flag frameworks are doing, is providing language bindings and the hooks so that is not part of your responsibility.
So I was purely pointing out that in microservice-based architectures, you often are distributing that tech debt in multiple places, every place that needs to read that feature flag to do a forked.
It cascades down to the it's not just the front end, it cascades to the back end and whatever other additional
that was
back
my point.
No, that's a good point. So not to be taken lightly. Any other comments on that? Suggestions? Dynamic configuration in Kubernetes and patterns?
And if you do choose it, I would highly +1 launch Darkly. I've used them a bunch and was very happy with their performance.
Cool. Very cool.
The way we've done it in Azure is using service bus. So we let the service bus, send the messages to all the nodes. And we got really pissed off about it. We were using the event grid, and that sucked. There are some limitations there, and switching to the service bus has been a lot more flexible. We're able to do queues and update, send different messages so that the nodes can know about each other.
All right. All right. So the next question relates to, so I don't know if it was last week or the week before that, somebody asked, like, how do you go about getting a mentor? Specifically in that case, I think the question was around SRE, but it's more general, right? Like, how do you go approach this stuff to get mentorship? We can all benefit from it. I have mentors that I talk with on a regular basis and help me out. So somebody else had a question recently, also posted in office hours, about how do you operate? Let me pull it up here. A little bit more conversation here today.
I think it's, I just wanted to mention one more thing for the feature flag stuff.
Oh, okay.
Doing something like feature flags gives you much more than this dynamic configuration type stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, there are other benefits, like I teach a DevSecOps class for the DoD, and one of the, like, MTTR, mean time to recover, is a huge, pain point in the DoD. Sometimes it can be days or weeks. And doing, like, when we talk about, how when you start doing continuous integration and you're pushing code to production every day, but you're not releasing that code yet, it's sitting behind a feature flag, and then you flip the switch on the feature flag. If something all of a sudden goes terribly wrong, you just flip the switch back, right? Yeah. And that just blows everyone's mind. It's like, oh my God, that's amazing, but that's something you can do with feature flags. If there's some terrible issue, you don't have to roll back, you don't have to fix forward, you can just flip the feature flag back.
Yeah. Instant
and
rollback.
If a deployment takes like forever, that's a big thing. Being able to roll back in like less than a second is a big thing. But this is one of those issues where it depends on the company. It depends how many people there are, how much experience they have with feature flags, what your style of development is. Do you want to do experiments and A/B testing and things like that, and so on and so forth? It's not a purely technical problem. For a tiny startup, just doing M variables is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry not to belabor the point, but the one other thing that really comes into play is your observability story when you're using feature flags, because you really need to, especially if you're doing like canaries, like send 10% of my traffic to feature 2, where everyone else is using feature version 1, and then being able to look at error rates and resource consumption and throughput and all of that kind of thing, one versus the other, so you can actually figure out, is this new version behaving the same way as the previous version, as far as all those other components, so that I feel safe to roll forward and make that 10% to 20%, 80%, 100% of my user base over time, and understanding how all those things work. So it's not an easy game to get all that right and get all those tools in place to monitor and do feature flagging. So my statement from before is like, unless you really know what you're undertaking and you have to do it this way because of the size and scale of your organization, I wouldn't recommend it to just anyone.
That's totally prudent advice. Very good. So yeah, I agree with all that. It's an investment in your observability in addition to configurability. All right. So on the question on, like, So the one we had here is, I'll try and keep this short. New listener to the office hours, inspired to ask this in Slack from the segment we had on finding a mentor a number of weeks ago. So he writes, my day job is with a team focused on AWS, doing traditional operations and some light automation work. I haven't been given a roughly defined roadmap on how to succeed in this type of role or career, and I'm curious how other people have gotten to where they are in their space, in their own ways. So what's some of the advice you guys have to pay it forward to be successful in your career doing DevOps type stuff? Especially maybe when you aren't provided a guideline for how to be successful in it. You have to carve your own path.
I think the other big distinction is coming from a background of ops.
Right.
I think most DevOps people come from a background of dev, but this guy's coming from a background of ops.
Yeah, more traditional ops, very conceivably, yeah.
So I kind of came from a little bit of an ops background, so maybe I could share for a couple minutes. It might be helpful.
Yeah.
So I started playing with computers. I'm sure like many of you in this group, we're all pretty passionate about what we do, which is why we're here. And I started playing with computers as a kid, trying to get a Counter-Strike server up and running for the longest time. It took me much longer than it would take today. It took me an hour now. It took me a year before trying to figure out how Linux worked, get it installed, all that fun stuff. Long story short, I did some financial work straight out of school and got into some data engineering. And shortly after I left that company, got into another company where I became the lead analytics developer. It's a startup, so you get whatever title you want.
Exactly.
I didn't know shit about what I was doing, but I was their lead analytics developer and knew nothing about predictive or any of that stuff. The reason I bring all that up is I got thrown into this role as their analytics guy. Their dev team that I was working side by side with cannot get deployments out the door. Their deployments would typically fail, and me being the analytics guy was not getting clean data. So to fix the data problem, I had to fix the deployment problem. And basically injected myself into the deployment process and used whatever little operational knowledge I had, realizing RDP copy and paste for production deployment is a bad idea, and getting them set up with, I'm sure some of you guys would laugh, being FTP, but FTP is a better step than RDP. And then going from FTP to the Azure native solution, which I think still uses FTP, but is a little cleaner, and then setting up some plumbing around it. So really, the approach I took was, here are problems I'm facing in my role. How do I fix them? I have to go fix these other problems that no one else is fixing. And then since then, that was at least 5 or 6 years ago, I've pretty much gone down that path. And then as to the comment around a mentor, I didn't necessarily have anyone to tell me how subnetting worked or how to set up an AWS VPC. I went on Udemy and other online courses, learned a thing or two about subnetting. If you threw subnet my way or CIDR range, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. And I'm leading a team to this day on DevOps stuff, but I'm no network expert. That being said, found some shortcuts and found some tools online, courses online to help me upskill in the areas that I'm lacking. With AWS these days, you don't really need to know, you don't need a CCNA to provision a network in AWS. They've abstracted so much of it. Understanding how route tables work, security groups, stuff like that, the basics can go a very long way. Like I said, I'm managing global infrastructure now, so I can assure you I'm not a network engineer. And that being said, having the right mentor, not necessarily a mentor, but having the right boss can go a long way.
Yeah, supportive of you learning and enabling, giving you the resources,
Yeah, and Udemy is a great resource. Pluralsight is great. I'm a little biased because I used to work there. And just online courses, I feel like, is a great way to kind of upskill on some of the stuff that you're lacking. Doesn't necessarily tell you all the best practices, but it'll give you that hello world that you're looking for. And then forums like this, user groups like we're in right now, is a great place to ask questions. But really being in the right environment, I would say if you're on a team, try, this might be a bad idea, but if you have extra cycles, go to a startup, get thrown on the deep end, and you're going to learn by trial by fire. And honestly, that's probably the quickest way if you want to accelerate your career. But so hopefully that little rant helps someone.
I think that was really valuable insight. And if I distill it down to a few key points that you brought up there, one, I think, is your environment is going to shape you, and the organization you're in right now, if you feel like they probably aren't doing things the way you think might be the more modern way. Like, there's a better answer to this stuff, but they're just not seeing it or doing it. At your position, at the stage in your career, it might be very difficult to try and change that. And why waste your sweat on that when there's so many other opportunities out there? So I would instead roll the dice, seek out other opportunities at startups, because that's where you get the trust. Because enterprises, it looks good on the title, but you don't get the experience, and you're very limited on how much lateral movement you have there. So my experience, my whole life, my whole career has been working at startups. I have never gone through a front door interview and passed. It's always been just by working with startups, working with companies, making yourself useful, and learning and growing through that. I think the self-starter attitude is really important, but you can't study and learn this stuff in the abstract. You can't say, okay, I'm just going to learn Terraform and read a book. And well, I think for most people, that's not the most effective way. You have to have a purpose with all of this stuff. So find yourself the side project that you've been wanting to do and make that your purpose. And then you learn these tools.
Can I say something about mentorship real quick?
Yeah, please, Jim.
So I, at one point, tried to start a kind of nonprofit foundation for kind of matchmaking professionals and kind of like young people in that profession. And what I learned from that experience was that was a couple of things. But one of the things is that mentors are in abundance. People really want to give back. They're all over the place. That was not hard to find at all. What was hard to find though was mentees that showed up consistently on time, that because they generally tend to be younger too and less experienced, so haven't learned all those lessons, those soft skills for being responsible, for being accountable, for valuing other people's time, that kind of stuff. So what I would like to say is that, like, if you're seeking out a mentor, they're out there. You simply got to ask. But then once you do ask and they agree to work with you, honor their time, respect their time, be there. And take the pains to be active in communication, and that will really and I think you'll find that there are resources out there that you don't realize are resources, is what I'm trying to get at. But then to honor that, so that actually works out.
That happens so often, especially with there's a lot of psychological payoff just committing to that you're going to do something and setting up that you're going to have this mentor or that you're making change. And then you got that psychological reward and you don't follow through and keep it up. So keep in mind that happens, and the rest of it is going to be harder. You're going to have to study, you're going to have to follow through. But yeah, commitment, professionalism, and consistency.
I'd 100% agree with Jim and what you said, Eric. And then just kind of reinforcing, if he's listening, just he or she is listening, but make time, because there's somebody that I'm mentoring and he's like, hey, can we push it back to next week and next week? And, weeks turn into months and they're like, oh, I'm busy with this. But if you truly want to make a difference and get out of this kind of rut that you may or may not be in currently, you have to, potentially sacrifice the rut that you're in now to make time for yourself. And I think it's one thing that I hate to see, especially with this one person I'm working with now, where I just you have to work at 9 o'clock at night sometimes, but I'm willing to go that extra mile. And I think, Jim, that was your point too. There's so many people that are willing to help, but truly making time, I think you have to just say screw you, boss, or whoever's kind of preventing you from.
It's got to become a priority that you are willing to say no to other things that come up if it's that important. This is your future in the end.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
I think
if I could add to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Todd, go ahead.
Usually I try to tie a dollar amount to things to make them important. So to somebody else's point earlier, if they're talking to someone in an enterprise and they're having a hard time forwarding their ideas, right? And you come up with a tale of two scenarios. Here's the way you're doing it. Here's the way you could be doing it. And this could be the cash that you save, by changing a process. That makes it more important to the other person, right? But that also works when you're trying to mentor someone. You say, listen, you're making $1.25 now. How'd you like to make $160 a year, right? All right, then show up. And if you don't, you'll get tired of being broke someday. I'm not going to press you. Right? And you can kind of leave it like a buffet, and they'll come back to the buffet when they're, tired of being broke. I know a lot of like really super like ridiculously talented young people who pick this up in a very short amount of time, but it's gotta be the priority for them, right? And usually that priority is driven by a couple of things, and typically it's it's making more money. LA that's a hard place to live.
It is, yeah.
Economically very unforgiving, so that's a big motivator.
California.
So I have some other advice that might actually be seem obvious, but it never happens enough. And that is, don't be afraid to admit that you don't know something, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
And I think that should be not only for new people, but everyone at every stage of their career. I've been in this business for like, I don't know, a couple, almost 3 decades now, or 2.5 decades. And I'm pretty new to the Cloud Posse team. And you can, Eric will attest that I probably, every time we get on a call, I ask 150 different questions, and it's basically clarify for this for me. Why are we doing it this way? Have you considered doing this? Has it looked at it this way? Can you explain the reasoning behind that to me? And that all of those things, while you may have some like imposter syndrome, feel that you don't know something, in the long run, you're going to be a much more well-rounded person and understand the domain you're working in so much more, because you got those questions answered and clarified in your own head, not just the way that you expect that someone else thinks that you should know, what the answer to that is. So I would always keep that in mind.
No, that's a really great tidbit to lower one's pride a little bit, be open to these things. Also, asking questions, make sure you really understand in your own head, right? That you got it. And
that's like framing the problem domain in your own mind is like 99% of the problem. So the other real quick thing I was going to add to that was on the person who asked that question's original thing said, I'm doing operations and some light automation. I would turn that to heavy automation. Anytime you see something that you're doing more than a couple of times manually, you should be thinking this is an automation opportunity, and how can I do that? Not only will that help you understand the task that you're doing, because you have to figure out how to automate it, but it will also free you up to learn additional things and grow your career and work into different domains, because you've automated the thing that you don't have to manually go and click the button on 100 more times next week.
That's a really good point.
Automate your way out of a job is like the advice I received so long ago, and I love it.
You'll never fully succeed, so you'll still have a job. Don't worry.
Exactly.
Just higher order problems.
I remembered hearing that before. I pulled out my SRE book and I looked at the section, and it talks about how Google places a 50% cap on their SREs doing ops work, and the rest of it is development of automation and stuff.
Yeah, so they call it's a toil budget is how that's referred to there. So basically no more than 50% of your work on toil and 50% on automation and improving process.
Eric, I had just a one point really. Something that I've found that has been really successful for me in the last few years, especially as we've changed from like, the wall has sort of come down. It used to be like everybody else was on the other side of the wall and we did everything. And now we're automating stuff so that everybody else can do it. So, the sort of, there's been a pivot in the whole industry and in many ways what we do. And, but the point I want to make is that I go out of my way to make sure that I am available and telling people what's going on. I set up like 2 meetings. We have a client SFTP site, expensive ass AWS transfer family SFTP site that every one of our customers is using. So I reached out to my product people and I'm like, you guys, why don't I spend a half an hour with you and show you what this looks like from the user? show you how we set it up, because you guys are going to be receiving the keys and you want to know what they are. I'm going to do a command line version. I'll do a GUI version. Do not promise customers that we will support them on their side with this, but giving, my CEO registered for this like 45-minute talk, but make sure to like go out of my way to make sure that people are educated, because the developers we work with are really smart and they want to know, they want background. So just going out of your way to do that has been really successful for me in forging relationships and offloading work, because now they freaking get it. And a few things like that.
Yeah. So one little quick way to spin that maybe is, it's not exactly what you said. It's similar though. It's like managing up. It's also making sure everyone knows what you're doing and enrolling other people in what you've done to get their input and get them excited about things. Well, we are out of time for today, so I really do gotta put the pause button on there. This was clearly a very interesting topic for everyone, and I'm grateful that we're all a lot of successful professionals on this team. So I'm glad you shared what your experiences have been to get where you are today. So for everyone, if you haven't yet registered for our weekly office hours, make sure you head over to cloudposse.com/office hours. You'll get an automatic invitation for all the future events, as well as an email with links to recordings of the past events. If you ever want to book a session with Cloud Posse, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz, and we always look forward to talking with you guys. Thanks everyone for sharing. Recording will be posted in a couple hours to the Office Hours channel and syndicated to YouTube as well as our podcast. So see you all same place, same time next week.
Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you guys.